Hello and welcome, beautiful ones. We are going to talk about vampires today, specifically psychic vampires, but there's so many things about vampires that excites me. So maybe in October I might kind of get something together about that because there's just so much to it, from the literature, the folklore, the stories that are purported to be true, the history, because that's the way that, back in the day, that's kind of how they explained illnesses, tuberculosis and things like that. And we have documentation that that's what they thought it was, that they thought it was vampires. And, you know, going back and researching these things, the scientists and the historians and scholars and things like that, they see how superstition really was so prevalent and how it kind of held people back from modern medicine. Now, maybe there might have been certain remedies for these things that may have worked in some ways, in some things, I'm not sure. But they were, they would treat these things as supernatural. And I think that sometimes maybe that's where we get our herbal remedies from, you know, garlic for everything, things like that. So, it's really interesting when it comes to, folklore and home remedies, recipes, um, you know, so many different things that even sometimes superstition was so prevalent with that. And if we really delve into the origins of something, we can see it. And it's just fascinating to me. I'm going to go into this really quickly because years ago I wrote this book and it wasn't anything exciting. You can't find it anymore, thank God. But I wrote this book and it was basically, true supernatural. And the guy at the corner store recognized my picture in the paper and he's like, "Hey, you're the one that was in the paper. You wrote the book." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I got some stories to tell you. You should come in and sit one day." Well, I never got the chance to go in and sit, and I regret that to this day. But he was so cool, and he was telling me that when he was in Vietnam, so at this time when I was talking to him was like early 2000s, maybe 2004, give or take. Um, and when he was in Vietnam, I would say I'm thinking 70s. I don't know why, if it was because of his age that I kind of gauged and thought that. I'm not sure, or if there was something that, anyway, he may have said something I don't remember. But that's the idea that I get. So anyway, he said that the houses over there were on stilts, and he said that they had these vampires over there, and I was like thinking, wow, okay, that's cool for one, but I'm wondering, did he actually see one? And so of course that question came to mind. I said, well, did you ever see one? He said yes. And so then my mind is spinning out of control because I'm like reeling in excitement that he actually saw something like that. Because, you know, you hear the stories about these types of things, creatures and cryptids and humanoids and all this, but to talk to somebody who claims to have seen it was just, I was so just amazed. And I asked him what they looked like. He said, like a cross between a zombie and a vampire. And so that was something that chilled me and shook me, but also to be talking face to face to somebody that was stone cold serious and just telling you, because they had somebody at that time, the supernatural was just kind of starting to pick up, with the ghost shows and all of that. Um, but it was almost like he just had somebody to talk to and tell what happened to him and was excited about that. And so what I experienced then was a totally different vibe of today where it's, more out in the open. But anyway, let me get back to the vampires. So when we look at a human, a fellow human being, we want to trust their eyes and their smile and their face because inherently they are us. And by trusting a fellow human being, we want to believe that people are good. We want to believe in good over evil. So there's this whole line of thought with that. This not only takes us away from our intuition when it comes to being around a vampire, such as in the movies when they're like, something's weird about that guy. Something is weird about that guy. But it's like they'll stay at the castle anyway. And by that point, I mean, maybe they don't really have much choice anyway. But they know something isn't quite right, but they're trusting what they're seeing which comes down to another face. And so when it comes to intuition, it's kind of the same thing. And I'm going to get into that in a moment. But then you've got, you have the life force, which is blood. And, in the psychic vampire sense, it's more energy, it's happiness, it is joy, it is, people that are feeling good, it is confidence. There's a few different ways that the whole psychic vampire works. I do want to be clear, it's not depression, it's not anxiety, that's not what a psychic vampire is. That's not a low vibe person at all. Low vibe people are those who pick on others, those who bully, those who gaslight, narcissists, all of that. That's low vibe. That's what low vibe is. If, there's a difference between me being depressed and me trying to make other people miserable. Big difference, right? So, that's the main difference. So like I said, we've got, all these different types of vampires and different types and things going on. And I find that exciting. Let me say really quickly, we are on February 1st of 2021. If you want to make any big changes, get to me. We will talk about booking a session, but it is not too late. January was just practice. I know the pitfalls of what we do, and we fall into those cycles, and, we get comfortable with things. In October, we start, after the holidays, I'm going on a diet, because that's when they start bringing out all the little cute autumn treats. And then, November, the same thing. Okay, I'm, going to start my diet after then, because we think that we'll be able to go, from Halloween to Thanksgiving and, kind of clean up our diet a little bit. But it doesn't quite work that way, because again, you go to the store, there's these treats everywhere. So we keep pushing it back to, after the new year, and then the new year rolls around and we make a change here or there and we don't stick with it. So we're already falling into those pitfalls in October. And, I have ways that we work around that. If you want to book a session, get with me. We'll talk about it. We'll see if there's something, let me say, if you want to talk about it before booking a session, we can do a 15-minute talk about it, just chatting, seeing if we're compatible, if I can help with something. Even if I can't help now, there's no obligation for you to purchase a session or anything like that. But maybe down the line you'll be like, oh, you know what, maybe now is the time. Because sometimes it just starts with, kind of moving things in that direction, And I do want to say that things may change at some point. So this is February 1st of 2021. So there may be a time where I'm not doing the free 15 minutes to, ask what you want and that kind of thing. But, we'll see from there going forward. Anyway, getting back on topic. So there's so many different types of vampires, and I think the same is true of psychic vampires as well. I'm really thinking that going into October that I might want to do something relating to vampires, just in general, just for fun, because that is my jam right there, the vampires. So I'm really thinking that, Dracula and Elizabeth Bathory, and shedding some more light, because they're saying now there's a new school of thought coming out that she was never a murderess, that she was just, I don't know if this is true, that she was a victim all her life. We know that that was true in a lot of ways. Where it was the turning point was where she began to victimize other people, as per the stories. Well, some scholars are coming out and saying, yeah, it doesn't quite look like that anymore. It looks like they were using that so that they could, hold her accountable for something she didn't do, so that they could continue to have control over her, because, she was pawned off in a marriage for land, in exchange for land, for her family's wealth. And she was very young at that time. So, I mean, she went through a lot. She was walled up when she was, basically a child. She was a child, so if those parts of the story, which are purported to be true, you know, there could also be another level to this story where she didn't murder anybody, but by the time these stories had taken shape, it took forever for them to kind of spread throughout the land. This was not something that happened overnight. And by then, you know, they made it to where she was, where they could justify, you know, some kind of land exchange type of thing. And, you know, there was a lot more to it. So I'm not going to get into that now. But if I do, you know, the whole Halloween thing, maybe I'll kind of really get into it way more. But anyway, point being, you know, that there may have been a lot more to her story than meets the eye. So it would, I think, be beneficial to look into it and see what you think. But let's go ahead and get back on topic here. So, psychic vampires. As I said, you know, narcissists, gaslighters, all of that. So you have the kind of psychic vampire that will attach themselves to somebody who is insecure or may have depression or things like that, or needs constant approval. And with that kind of personality, with that type of psychic vampire, they are vibing so low, they attach themselves to somebody who's, you know, the person may be doing fine, and then all of a sudden they come in and they attach themselves and they start bringing that person's vibe down because it helps them to raise their energy. So here's the psychic vampire starts here. Here's the person that has maybe an insecurity, and the psychic vampire latches on and drags that person down, letting the psychic vampire rise to feeling good about themselves. This can come in the form of somebody who's insecure. This is where I want to really emphasize, if you feel like you have to ask people, are you mad? Are you mad? Try not to do that, because narcissists, whether they're a psychic vampire or not, or gaslighters and all of these types of things, they may be okay in that moment. They may say, oh, I'm not mad. But if they notice that, they get their hooks in. And I don't want that for anybody. Especially because most times when people ask me if I'm mad at them for something, I'm not mad at all. You know, it's, you know, it takes a lot to really get me mad. And usually the only time that people actually make me mad is when they are just mean and rude and they're saying mean things to me and they don't apologize. And then finally, you know, after a while, I lash out and then I'm the bad guy. And that is exactly what a psychic vampire is. They push you and push you and push you until you react, and then they make you out to be the bad guy. So most people who ask me, are you mad? I don't feel that way at all. Um, and I think it's very important to discern that. And I want to say, I've been there. I've been the person that would, you know, worry that I made somebody mad. Um, and I would be so focused on how I made other people feel that I did not think about how that person was making me feel in turn, or how I felt around them, or how my energy merged with theirs, or how it didn't merge with theirs, you know? So that's something that I speak from experience. Most things I speak from experience. And so when I have been in that insecure space, I would be doing well. Somebody would come in, you know, make a comment about my weight, which was always a struggle, the weight itself, but also how I felt about myself. You know, that was the struggle too, just how I felt about me. And so I'd be feeling good, and they would make a comment and it would drag me down, and then they were doing fine. So I know that type of psychic vampire all too well. Um, then there's the types where, now that I'm more confident, it feels very different, but I can sense where, you know, my confidence level is a little bit too much, maybe. But the type of psychic vampire, again, they burn low, they try to attach, and they will try to shake your confidence. And if they don't shake you, they keep on and they keep on. But they're trying to match your level. And then they try to merge into who you are. So they forget themselves. There's a whole thing about the cuttlefish. When it mates with its partner, the male kind of meshes into the female and they lose themselves. Well, that's what I'm going to use as a parallel. Once the friendship begins, then the psychic vampire tries to become the other person and merge, or they either they try to become that person, or they try to make the psychic vampire become them, or the other person to become them, you know. So it's kind of like there's no blurred. But being that I was confident, that was the catalyst, because if I had had the insecurities that I'd had previously, I might have started dressing like this person. I might have merged into their energy. But instead, I think that they hit a block of confusion, because they would, be trying to get me to wear my hair. I do speak this from experience, a specific. They would try to get me to wear their hair like theirs. They would try to get me to dress like them. But then they would try to, you know, use my style in their own, incorporate my style. So it was like they weren't sure, because I don't think they'd encountered that yet, but I could tell they were trying to glean from that. And, because I wasn't moving or wasn't budging, it was more difficult for them to make those changes. So, I mean, there's different aspects of it like that. And so when you're feeling really good within yourself and you start, maybe you meet this person and you know that, okay, so they're going to have something to say about every little thing that I say. Sometimes it's negative. Sometimes it's so-and-so does that and they do it better. And they'll, tell you everything that you do that's not as good, or that it's wrong, or, on and on and on. So when they're in that space, they're trying to drag you down constantly. You start to guard yourself. And guarding yourself is like think of it like playing dodgeball, because we're trying to, with a whole bunch of balls. So if you have like 5 balls coming at you at one time, you're like trying to block, and you become physically exhausted. Eventually, first of all, you're trying to block everything. You're gonna probably get hit when you're not expecting it, and then you're just gonna wear out, and you're gonna be like, okay. It's the same thing with psychic vampires, because we're trying so hard to block and guard ourselves so that it doesn't get through. And then we say, we're blocking so much through that conversation that finally they say something, and we have been really good about not reacting and saying, oh, I love this, or I love that. And then finally we don't think anything of it, and we say, well, I gotta go because I'm making dinner tonight. And they ask what's for dinner. Or sometimes we say, I'm making meatloaf. And then they'll start to, you know, just completely bring us down and say, well, how do you make yours? And make us feel bad about that. So they make us feel bad about things that we enjoy, or things, just everything that we're doing. Doesn't even have to be things we enjoy. But that's how those little things get through, because we're blocking so hard, and it's exhausting. It's the energy version of playing dodgeball, like I said. Or sometimes in the opposite situation, we're blocking so hard because we don't want them to become us, because they don't know who they are, so they're trying to become who we are, and it gets a little bit confusing. So that's another type of psychic vampire. I think that sometimes it also might depend on who it is, because I have observed where somebody can be a psychic vampire, but their energy is going to shift from person to person depending on what the other person is giving off. So they may not be empathic in knowing how somebody feels, or caring for that matter, but they have to have some sense of intuition to know what somebody's energy is saying, and how far they can take it, and how deep they can get those hooks. So that's why I say, from the beginning, assess yourself, because it's important to, if we think that we've made somebody feel bad, assess it, from within, and say, okay, so we're going to learn. Tomorrow's a new day. We are moving on. Okay. So, then we take that knowledge and that understanding of self, and we say, okay, so what is it that I can learn from that? But don't take it to them, and every time that you think that that somebody that has entered your life newly or somebody that, hasn't shown that you've upset them or anything like that. Because when we take that to them and say, I'm so sorry, they can use that against us at times. As I said, they may be fine with it in the moment, but then they may use it later. And because like I said, they are intuitive. They know what weak parts we have. They know our weaknesses. They know our Achilles heels. It's like they they know what they're doing. And so on the other aspect, I think that sometimes intuitively, where they are trying to siphon that confidence, that feeling that we know what we're, if somebody comes off like we know what we're doing, we are, presenting ourselves well. Another thing, oh, this is a perfect one. If somebody presents themselves like they are very well to do, a psychic vampire may try to go get into their limelight, so to speak, because they want a piece of that for themselves, and then they become different. That is another aspect where the psychic vampire will mirror and change because they want something. So they know what they're doing on some level. They know. How to block them off. So once they've gotten their hooks in, it's really hard to block off, because once we begin to try to win their approval, and be who we think that they need us to be, it becomes a cycle. And then if they go cold, we're like, okay, I'm sorry, and we chase after them. We don't have to do that. So don't do that from the beginning. Wait until you know that person, and then you can have those conversations about something a little more in depth. But I think that taking it back a notch can help you to know what you need, so that it's not becoming a situation where you're taking your energy and giving it all to them. As the example, blocking off in the beginning makes it easier so that it doesn't become a draining cycle. In the other situation where we give all of our energy because we think that, oh, this is fun, I love hanging out with this person, they're a blast, but there's something that we don't quite, just like a vampire, in the movies, something that just doesn't sit right. It doesn't feel right. There's some prickly energy going on. But we are having fun. So that is what we're focused on. We're focused on the fun stuff. And, then all of a sudden we start seeing what we knew was there, but we ignored it. So the best way in the beginning of any friendship, for that matter, because no matter what side this is on, whether it is the one who's going to latch on and become a narcissist or a gaslighter, or the one who's going to merge their energy into us completely, it's important for us to have middle ground. So put up those boundaries. In the beginning, it's a lot easier to say, I've got plans, I can't go, than it is and it's also easier to say no with a more limited explanation. Sometimes when people push for that explanation, we kind of know where they're coming from, and it validates what we already know, that they're going to always need some explanation, or that they're going to be, the junior high peer pressure. Well, come on, it's like, no, I've got responsibilities, that kind of thing. So it does let us know. But, it's easier to put up those boundaries in the beginning than later, because also psychic vampires don't test people as much, or they test a little bit. So in the beginning, they're not going to test you as much, or not likely to test you as much. It does happen, but it's not as likely. So down the line, when they're more comfortable, that's when they're going to be a little bit more pushy. Or if all of a sudden you say no, they're going to be like, well, why? We did this last week. We've been hanging out all the time. Yeah, but my responsibilities caught up with me. Yeah, but, you can take a night off, and when you really can't, and it gets to that point. So it's easier. Set the boundaries. Let it know that you're a responsible adult, even if you're not, for your own well-being, And so, that's the best way, is stopping it before it starts. If it's already in motion, it's going to be a little bit harder to slow down. So if you're on the aspect where you're chasing and pursuing them, stop. I know it's easier said than done. I have been on that side before where I'm just like wanting so bad for somebody to validate me or approve that I forget that this is not serving me. How is this helping me? And so break away. Know that you don't need anybody's approval. And that sometimes we feel comfortable in trying to win approval from somebody we know that we're not going to get it from, because somehow that becomes ingrained in us. I don't know where or why that happens, but somehow it becomes a comfort zone. And when we're easily given that approval, it's like, where's this coming from? It feels so weird and surreal. So then, of course, let's see. So talked about staving it off. Okay, that's how you break it off. So if you're already in it, and you want to preserve the friendship, I know that's hard, but sometimes it's just best to just, we're done. But if you want to try to make a clean break, start putting the boundaries up. It's the only way. The friendship itself may suffer, and I know that's hard, but also to know that maybe we can catch up again when they kind of have their growth and then when they learn who they are. Because if they think that they're us, they're never going to find themselves. So, that's another thing. We don't want them to think that they're us. We don't want them to continue to merge their energy with ours. It's going to be confusing for them. So we do have to do what's best for them and let them have their own experience and their own journey and let them fly and spread their wings. But yeah, being firm is the only way. If you want to give that little added dose of something, here's what I do. I have done spells not to make them leave. This is important because when we do things, it's got to be the right timing. Give them something good to look forward to, something that they're going to learn from, a journey of happiness in some way, what's going to bring them happiness and let them live their own life. It doesn't have to be something that you designate for them, but put that word in, put that word out that you want something good to happen to them so that you're no longer the center of their attention or their life. And, that's one way of breaking it, breaking away from the cycle. Tourmaline by the door is another. I'm hesitant to say anything with salt because, yeah, everybody knows about salt. But also, what if your animals or some neighborhood cats get into it? You don't want that either. So, be mindful of how you work with those kinds of things and herbs and whatnot. Plants also. I did have basil, but it died. But I have a rosemary plant that is a huge bush now. So I got that, and I got a small sage thing. It was one seed that survived, one random seed that survived, that rolled out into the yard. And so I had to replant it because it was right on the sidewalk. So it's doing okay considering. I planted the rest in a pot and nothing, not a thing. But I'm just so glad that one came up. But little plants like that can kind of help. I think basil is one of the better ones for that. But rosemary's good too. Just having it by your door and, kind of blessing your doorway here and there. I don't think that you necessarily have to use herbs or crystals or anything. You can use intention. I've, wiped away bad energy with my hands, That's part of why if I do any kind of spiritual cleansing, I, include my hands because I do use them a lot for, things like that. But I think that you can wipe away energy. And it's not going to be an easy thing because, once a psychic vampire kind of has their hooks in, you really have to use your intuition though. Like I said, instead of looking inward, such as what was it that I did to upset this person? And instead of looking, or maybe I should say solely, and looking solely outward, coming to that middle ground of being kind of in between. you know, where it's not just one way or another, where it's not just what did I say to upset this person, or where it's not completely about um, feeling good in the interaction with the person, but coming into the middle ground and saying, you know what, how did I feel about that, because yeah, I enjoyed the conversation, or no, I'm worried about that I made them feel bad. Stripping those things away and saying, okay, what did I feel? And energetically, I felt, porcupine energy before. I've felt that so many times. Um, Actually, not a whole lot. I'm gonna be on the fence more with this. I felt it once very prominently. Another time it wasn't quite porcupine, and well, two other times it wasn't quite porcupine. But everything has its own unique feeling. Sometimes it's very heavy. Sometimes it feels like a weight on your shoulders and your chest when you get around somebody. For some, it feels like not quite like a porcupine, like if I reach out and, I was avoiding somebody because it was all in their aura. And I felt it, like walking by the pricks. And then with another one, it was like I just felt like I needed a bath. It was that intense. So I felt something that wasn't quite right, but it was always different with different people. Just the same as, good energy is always so different. Um, and I hope that that kind of clarifies some points about the whole psychic vampire thing. But, you know, um, let's see, today's February 1st of 2021. I will answer questions up until, what the heck, we'll say Valentine's Day of 2021. So I will be available to answer questions. Chances are, if you, come in at some other point, I might still answer. But because I want to try to trudge forward with other things, um, you know, I may get shifted with my focus, but up until then, we have a guarantee. After that, you never know. So February 14th, 2021 is the cutoff date for any kind of questions that you may have regarding psychic vampires. And like I said, it's kind of a balance of knowing your core self and how other people around you resonate with your energy. Like I said, looking solely inside, looking inside yourself and seeing what you sense and how your energy is at its core. Well, when you know that, you know what something outside of yourself feels like. And sometimes it's not necessarily, it helps us to identify, okay, this is going on, this is making me uncomfortable. Or even subtle sounds like a buzzing, that maybe other people may not even hear it, but you might. And, when we're starting to act out of character and things like that. But also when we're presented with somebody else's energy that's not quite what we want. Not quite what is conducive to our own peace, that kind of thing. So, anyways, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. And I hope you have a wonderful day.